the history. Nigeria spent $61 billion, billion with a B, to help liberate our people from 1960 to 1995. In those 35 years, Nigeria spent $61 billion, people. Dollars. We're not talking rands here. We're talking dollars. They also issued us passports when we needed it. You know what? I will just show you. You can go to the archives yourselves. You can do the history yourselves. From 1960 to 1995, Nigeria spent over $61 billion to support the end of apartheid. And this is according to the South African Institute of International Affairs. This is coming from our archives. This is the same Nigeria that set up the Southern Africa Relief Fund. The same Nigeria whose civil servants and public officers made a 2% donation from their monthly salary. And the same Nigerian students that skipped their lunch to make donations. And by June of 1977, in just 6 months, look at that, they were able to contribute $10.5 million. They called it the Mandela tax. And you want to know something? If you read the history, they were so proud to be contributing towards it. That's why kids in schools were skipping their lunch to be able to contribute to this fund.
I would like to start off by saying, I know if you are a South African and maybe you are unemployed, or maybe you can see that we have a problem of criminality, unemployment, and all those things, you might be frustrated. And I know and understand very well that if you are frustrated, you might end up putting out that frustration on everybody or on anything because you are frustrated. But I just want us to use logic or to apply logic for a moment. History is very important. I understand we have all these problems, criminality, unemployment, and so forth and so forth. But the most important thing is that history is very important. You know why history is so important? It's because history can make you to love yourself. In most cases, history will teach you to acknowledge yourself, to acknowledge your people, or to love yourself. Because right now we are living in a times whereby there are people who are selling drugs in South Africa. Our children are suffering from all these drugs and many other things. We have crime, high unemployment rate. We have many people who are illegal in South Africa. I get it. Yes, you may be frustrated. And again, your frustrations may be understandable. But the most important thing is that we have to acknowledge history. Because if you acknowledge history, then it means you love yourself. And if you love yourself, then means you may always apply logic in every decision that you make. Let me just make this simple example. If you have a child and one of your children makes a mistake, it doesn't mean you are going to blame all your children for a mistake that was made by just one child or one individual. You won't do that. Same applies to brothers. If one of your brothers mess up with you, you won't start putting your frustrations on everybody or on anything. You won't do that. Why? Because you have to use logic. And there's something which is very important that I'm going to talk about in this video. And I would like to encourage you to keep on watching this video. So I just want to go back to history. Why history is so important is because we have to remember that during apartheid system here in South Africa, we have many countries that supported South Africa. We can talk about Lesotho, we can talk about Mozambique, Swaziland, Angola, Zambia, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, and many other countries here in Africa. Why they supported South Africa is because every time or whenever they saw South Africans going through the rough times, they saw themselves. It's like looking at the mirror. Who do you see? You see yourself. So if you see, like for an example, your neighbor going through a hustle, going through a rough time, in other words, you have to see yourself in your neighbor. This is the beginning of loving yourself. So these countries, to be honest, they contributed a lot towards eliminating apartheid in South Africa. So they supported us in many ways. Others supported South Africans with weapons. Others supported South Africans financially, and so forth and so forth. So in other words, we can say at the end of the day, they contributed a lot towards the elimination of what? The elimination of apartheid system in South Africa. But in order for us to be able to acknowledge this, we have to love ourselves. And the first step towards loving yourself is to know your history, is to know where you come from, is to know who supported your mother, is to know who supported your father whenever your father was going through the struggle. But it doesn't mean you have to tolerate everything they do. For an example, here in South Africa, right now we have the problem of criminality. So it doesn't mean now you have to tolerate everything that they are doing, especially those who are engaged or involved in criminal activities. But at the same time, again, we have to be careful not to generalize. But there's something that I just want to talk about in this video.
Nigeria that allowed our South African students, our South African people to come over and study for free. For free. They welcomed our exiles as well. Thabo Mbeki was able to benefit from Nigeria. This is the same Nigeria that their government issued more than 300 passports for our South African citizens. The same Nigeria that lobbied for the creation of the United Nations Special Committee Against Apartheid. If you don't believe me, go through the archives. Go and do your fact check. Because the history is there, the research is there, it's even coming from our own people. It's all there. I stitched this in my last video. Oh, and this thing of Nigerians are bringing in the drugs to our country, please show me. We recently had a massive drug bust, a 2 billion rand drug bust, and show me the Nigerian. Let's please spot the Nigerian. Please show me where there is a Nigerian in sight, because y'all are very quick to talk about how, oh, they're bringing in the drugs to a country. Where? Because this thing of drug smuggling, this thing of child trafficking, it is not something specific to Nigerians. Not even close. Because in this picture, it's 2 South Africans, one of which is a descendant of, we won't go there, and 2 Mexicans, and there was a 5th suspect that recently came on. There is not a Nigerian in sight. We have just played Spot the Nigerian. Do you see a Nigerian in this? No.
I just want to say it's very important to know who to blame. But I know that many motivational speakers have messed up with our brains by telling us that you have to blame yourself all the time. You have to blame yourself. Don't shift a blame to anyone. Yes, there are instances or situations whereby you have to shift a blame on yourself. But if someone breaks into your house, you cannot blame yourself. You have to blame that particular person, or you have to blame maybe the security or maybe the root of the problem. But it would be necessary to also blame the very same person who broke into your house. And again, let's say for an example, your neighbor has a child. Your neighbor has a child And now this child is problematic, is involved in all these criminal activities and so forth and so forth. So it doesn't mean because of this child, now you have to blame the entire family. You have to blame your neighbor and his entire family just because of one child. So that is why I'm like, we have to be careful when it comes to generalizing. That is why we have to use logic all the time. So what do I mean by saying we have to know who to blame? In other words, in South Africa, we have a problem of criminality. We have a problem of criminality. Right now, as we speak, we have many people who are selling drugs. But it doesn't mean if you have identified one Nigerian who is selling drugs, now all Nigerians are selling drugs. It is very important to know who to blame. Let me just make this another example. When it comes to this other example, I just want to say, let's just forget a moment about Johannesburg, what is happening in Johannesburg, in the big cities of South Africa. Let's just go to our locations. Let's go to our locations, our neighborhoods, where we are staying right now as we speak. Who is selling drugs in those neighborhoods? Who is selling this drug called Nyaupe, the one which is deadly? Who is selling this type of a drug in our communities? Then you will discover, or you will find out, that it's our people. And again, based on my experiences, you'll discover that some of the pastors are involved. Some of the pastors are involved. Some of the people who are considered, who are taken as role models in these communities, are also involved in selling what? In selling drugs. And all of them are South Africans. They are involved in selling what? In selling drugs. And again, we might have like some Nigerians who are selling drugs and others who are selling drugs. But in general, in other words, we are all involved in this problem. But it doesn't mean if the pastor who is a South African is selling drugs, all South Africans are selling drugs. So it doesn't mean if I've discovered that there's someone from Nigeria who is selling drugs, all Nigerians are selling drugs. So we have to be careful of what? Generalizing. Why? Because now I want us to know who to blame when it comes to this problem. So since we have this problem of drugs, and it's like all of us, we are involved in this thing of selling drugs, there's only one person who can dissolve this whole thing with a blink of an eye. And that individual or that person is the government of South Africa. This is the person who can dissolve this problem immediately. In other words, within a blink of an eye. It's very possible. But why is not happening? Why is not happening? In other words, there's a problem. Now we know that the real person that we need to blame now is the government, because this is the problem of what? This is the problem of criminality. This is the problem of crime. So he has to deal with it, and then everything will be okay. Everything will be fine. So, but why is not happening? So you should not be surprised to find out that some of the gurus who are involved in this whole thing have created a mission by using the selling of drugs. Then at some point, maybe you come to realize that the selling drugs is actually a mission, because I believe that the police officers can deal with this thing like that. It won't take long. It won't take long at all. But now the problem is the government. But instead of blaming the government, we blame other people. And there are many people who are blaming like EFF. How can you blame the organization that is not in power? How can you blame the policies of an organization that is not in government, that is not running government? Because right now, as we speak, people are like, it's because of the open border policy. But the very same organization, which is EFF, is not in government right now. So that is why when it comes to crime, we cannot blame EFF. When it comes to people who are not documented in South Africa, we cannot blame EFF. But instead, we have to blame the government of South Africa, because right now we have people maybe whom people regard as illegal immigrants here in South Africa. But who to blame? Who to blame? Should you blame EFF? EFF is not in government. And again, right now, as we speak, we have many industries who are employing people outside of South Africa. Even though right now we are aware that South Africa is suffering from a high unemployment rate. South Africa is suffering from high unemployment rate. But these industries, restaurants, retails, logistics, and many others are employing people from outside. So just because these people are from outside, people are quick to shift blame on EFF, the organization that is not in power. When in reality, the person that you have to shift a blame to is the very same government, Labor Department, because there are rules here. There are rules and laws to say there are skills that are only for South Africans, or that should only be for people of South Africa, in order to eliminate what? In order to eliminate poverty and unemployment. For an example, logistics, as a truck driver, working in a retail company, in a restaurant. So those jobs should be reserved for who? For South Africans. But Labor Department is not holding these companies accountable. These companies, they do as they please. But who do you blame? You have to blame the very same government you always keep on power. Right now, as we speak, we have many truck drivers in South Africa who have code 14, but they cannot work. They cannot get employment. What is it that the Labor Department is doing? Because these industries are employing people from outside. So right now, people should just forget about the policies of EFF and focus on the government of South Africa, because the government of South Africa is the one that you have to blame, instead of blaming Nigerians when it comes to drugs, when it comes to all these things, the gurus of drugs, or maybe the drug lords and all these things. You have to shift the blame on government, because government has power to dissolve this whole thing just like that. The government has power. The government has power to say, you know what, you industries, you have to prioritize South Africans. You have to employ South Africans in truck industry and all these things. But now the media has blinded us, and has made us to fight against each other without fighting the root of the problem. That is why we end up fighting against each other, doing all sorts of things. But when the main problem is there, and no one is attacking the main problem, because when it comes to employment, unemployment, South Africans not being prioritized, Labor Department should be blamed. Then when Labor Department is blamed, in other words, you are blaming the government, then the Labor Department will do the right thing, because they have to know who is employed in all these companies. Same applies when it comes to this thing of selling trucks. You have to know who are the real owners of these tracks, so that at the end of the day, you can just eliminate them or do away with them instantly, just like that. So many countries in the world are suffering from all these things of selling trucks. That is why I believe it's a mission.
Unspeakable. The hate for the descendants of our liberators. But y'all are comfortable with the descendants of colonizers, which we should be, right? We've gotten to a place where it's like, okay, this is the reality. We're going to make it work now. Because we as people of color are the bigger person and we will choose peace. Or at least I was under that impression in the beginning. But then I've also come to realize that no, it actually had nothing to do with that. It had to do with force. This is what the government chose for us, and therefore we will follow through. And maybe that's what is necessary. Because some of y'all can't think for yourselves. You just need to be led by a shepherd, or led because you are sheep in your hatred.